So the way that the Ashab and the companions, they used to come to Abu Bakr and sometimes criticize him, question him. History of Islam from the very beginning is aligned with political challenges and clashes. You're not allowed to mention anything that could be a kind of, criticizing Sahaba.
Yes.
Only you are allowed to speak those nice aspects and beautiful things. Whether you have to keep silent.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Dear viewers, welcome to our first episode of the Fatemiyah series, where we will be inshallah having an academic discussion about the events that unfolded after the death of the Prophet and that led to the martyrdom of Hazrat Zahra salamullahi alayha. And joining me in this podcast will be Agha Dr. Muhammadi. And inshallah, we are hoping to have an academic discussion to look into the sources and see what can be proven historically in a very academic manner. And so if you're interested in this and you want to keep up with all our content, so I would highly suggest you please like and subscribe to our channel. So Agha Muhammadi, before we begin with the actual discussion around Hazrat Zahra and what occurred, if you can tell us generally that if we're considering trying to establish a historical event, what should be our methodology? How do we prove something has occurred historically? Is it the way people generally hear that, okay, you look at the sanad and you say, okay, is this a sahih hadith, is this a zaif hadith? Are we looking at those kind of things? Or how exactly does one go about proving or establishing that some event happened in any historical time period?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is a very important and fundamental question before getting into the historical discussion itself. Usually, what is the custom in discussing history, especially history of Islam, is that people refer to historical books and start narrating stories took place in the history of Islam from the sources which exist. While before getting to that, it is very important to know the methodology of a right way of discussing the historical events, more specifically in the history of Islam. Why it is important? Because history of Islam from the very beginning is aligned with political challenges and clashes, the issue of authority, the issue of power. And this is something that sort of caused lots of censorship in the history and the way that it was narrated and the way that generally speaking, the narrative of Islam and Islamic stories were formed, and few people and few specific approaches existed. And so without knowing all these issues, just referring to historical books, you cannot find out what exactly took place. So in order to understand the history of Islam in a right way, we have to deal like a detective. When a detective comes to a crime scene, you shouldn't expect the criminal to come and introduce himself or herself. You have to look for every tiny, small clue that putting them together may give you some information about what has happened and the idea behind the crime taking place. So the same way, because there was, I said, it was connected to history with the authority and power. And more specifically, when this issue of authority is combined with a religious aspect, from the time of Muawiyah, we see that before that, the way that the power and the authority and successorship to the Prophet was considered, was seen by Khulafa, was a worldly position. Like the way that we choose a mayor, a governor of a city, exactly with those values they came to, and merits they came to choose the first Khalifa after the Prophet. If you just look at the debates that they had, there is no specific virtue that they looked for in choosing the representative of the Prophet, the successor of the Prophet. And this was mentally because of the background they had. The Madinatun Nabi is the first place that a central state is established in whole Hijaz. Hijaz before that didn't experience any central state. There were tribes living here and there, and the tribes had their own head, their own treasury, their own system of survival. And even in Mecca, we don't have any political system before Islam. And it is only the tribes living together. So you see that in every single occasion, we have some heads of tribes sitting and consulting and making decisions. You have heard the stories about putting Hajarul Aswad in its place, that there was a huge dispute over it. And finally, the Prophet found a solution. So he actually suggested that such an honor to be shared by all the different tribes who were there, and one representative to come to do that. So I mean, it was tribes working together. So there is no experience of a central state. So because of that, the formation of Madinatun Nabi, before that it is Yasrib, is of vital importance in the new experience that Hijaz and people of Hijaz were having over the issue of power and authority. And again, you cannot understand it without understanding the mentality of people, the mindset of people, the values of people, the way that people used to see the issue. Almost all Hijaz have this experience of being nomads, being what they call it Ahlul Badiyah, Badu, and people of desert. Yathrib is different. In Yathrib, people were from Yemen originally. So there is a dispute among the historians why people from Yemen moved to Yathrib. Some say because of an earthquake or a flood or something. Anyhow, people of Yathrib are civilized people of Medina. But the rest of, Ta'if and Mecca, which are two major cities, even people of Mecca, they were Bedouins, the Quraysh. They were Bedouins who settled there for around 200 years before the advent of Islam. And the rest are living in desert. They are the people of the desert. The culture is the culture of desert. Quran, when talking about them, says, Al-A'rabu ashaddu kufran wa nifaqan wa ajdaru an la ya'lamu hududa ma anzalallahu ala rasulih. People of desert are very entitled and likely not to understand the deep concepts in the religion, not to understand the limits of what Allah is revealing to the Prophet. And because of being narrow-minded, because of the mindset they have, they are very likely to get into kufr and nifaq and hypocrisy, because they cannot digest the nature of revelation. And these people very naturally will have many problems with Islam. And actually, this is one of the main problems that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had. When you look at the other prophets like Prophet Musa, like Prophet Ibrahim, like Prophet Isa, they all were, the prophets that we know, they basically settled and were preaching in the societies and communities that they had come some experience of civilization. So they knew the basics. But for the Prophet, it's a big challenge. People of desert, and you see they have the big number. And this itself was a serious problem for the Prophet and for Ahlul Bayt. When you study the teachings of the Prophet, the teachings of Ahlul Bayt, you find it very elite kind of teaching. So, when the gap between you and the society you are living is too much in the way of understanding things, then automatically you will have problems. When the Prophet said, "Ma uziya nabiyyun mithla ma uzit," no prophet was actually bothered and teased and harassed the way that I did. It is because some aspect of it is this, that the Prophet had to deal with people that, not all of them, but anyhow, big number of them, they couldn't properly understand Islam. They couldn't properly understand the teachings that was being revealed to the Prophet. So the Prophet should get along with them smoothly and patiently and try to develop them and make great men out of them. And this akhlaq is a miraculous thing in the Prophet himself. Besides Quran, this akhlaq of the Prophet is a great miracle that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala admires it in Quran, saying, إِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. You are of a great manner and akhlaq and temper. This itself is very important. So there is such atmosphere. And even historically, when you look at the way that Ansar and Muhajirin lived, you find occasions that there are severe challenges. I said this culture difference itself, and not having any background of, I'd said, political state and political experience. So for them, Islam is the first, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the first person who established any kind of political state. And because of that, it is totally seen by those people as what they already knew, that how to lead a tribe. So in the tribe, people share the power, the families, it goes around. So if the head of tribe was from a family and he died, then this honor will be given to another family. So all families in the tribe, they have such honor to enjoy being head of the tribe. So you see that when they say the Prophet was from Bani Hashim, his successor cannot be from Bani Hashim. You cannot understand this without understanding that tribal mentality. Why they had such problem with choosing Imam Ali alayhi salam? They said, no, the Prophet is from the very tribe, so this authority should go around. This chance also should be given to the other tribes as well, to the other clans within the tribes as well. So, I mean, that mindset, you cannot understand what happened without that understanding that mindset. And but the Khulafa, I mean, one of the privileges they had is that they respected that culture and they got advantage of that culture, especially the second Khalifa. He exactly has the very mentality of those people. We have it in Sahih Bukhari. I think this is very important. This part in his wasiyah, in his will to his successor, when he is making wasiyah for the third Khalifa, he says, "Usihe, I advise him to certain things." One of the things is about Arab, the Bedouins. He says, I advise him to take care of Arab and be nice to them. Why? He says, لأنهم أصل العرب ومادة الإسلام. This part is of vital importance. He says because Arab, the Bedouins, they are the essence of Islam. So what kind of understanding is there that Quran says they are very unlikely to understand the true teachings of Islam, and they are very prone to get into kufr and shirk? And Quran says some of them also are good people, they observe their religion. But in different places, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blames them. قَالَتِ الْأَعْرَابُ آمَنَّا. Allah says, no, Iman didn't enter your hearts. Just say, we are Muslims, it's utterance of tongue. And فَلَمَّا يَدْخُلَ الْإِيمَانُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. Still, Iman is not in your hearts. So what happens that within almost 20 years, those people become the essence of Islam. So you cannot understand what happened in the history without knowing these points. So why should people reject Imam Ali? Why should people reject Lady Fatima to Zahra? And then everything should be covered, should be sort of swept under the carpet, as if nothing has happened. So knowing all these, the books like Fajr al-Islam by Ahmad Amin, I think this is one of the very good books. He has different books, Zuhal Islam, Fajr al-Islam. If somebody is interested to know the culture, the atmosphere that Arabs used to live at the time of the Prophet and what kind of mindset was there, and in that mindset you see that Ahlul Bayt naturally are alone. So Imam Ali's being lonely is not only the matter of people leaving him alone after the Prophet. Even at the time of the Prophet, Imam Ali is alone. But the Prophet was a support. And after the Prophet, Imam Ali and Lady Fatima and the family, they lost the support. So they faced all those challenges. And the main reason being that, just look at Nahjul Balagha, look at Qurarul Hikam, the hadiths of Imam Ali alayhi salam, the way that Imam Ali alayhi salam deals with the daily issues, the lifestyle he had. This is not something that even sometimes people at our time may find it difficult to digest, let alone the people at that time, in that culture, that atmosphere. So Imam Ali alayhi salam, for example, considering all to be the same, no virtue, no merit for people other than taqwa. While in the Arabic society, in the society which is used to the culture of unsur akhaka zaliman aw mazluma, you have to be support to your brother from your tribe, no matter whether he's oppressed or oppressed, because the first and the number one value and fazila that you have to take care of is the family, is a tribe. And Imam Ali salam doesn't care in any sense for those values of the Arab. So as Arab, you will not like a person like Imam Ali salam. Even today, for us, we have these different, divisions that we have among us. So we always make it us and the others. And Imam Ali salam is beyond all these, artificial borders that we have. And this is very serious in the life. So you see that the culture of the people. So I want to say that we shouldn't think that those people were monsters. They were very bad people behaving a little bit like this. So even if we were in their position, may Allah forbid it, but from such big tests that you may fail, Quran calls it fitna, the seditions and big tests that people may fail, it's difficult to survive in such tests, and those people were tested with a difficult one. And so Imam Ali alayhi salam and Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, altogether, Lady Fatima, they were lonely that people didn't understand them properly. They couldn't digest the position, and that the tribal mindset, one of the very basic elements there is jealousy. Because when you live in a tribe, in a very dry land like Hijaz, there is always shortage of water, shortage of sources, and this makes you, the impact of nature on people's culture, on people's akhlaq and morality, is that there is a kind of a permanent and constant challenge and fight over sources and resources. And this makes people naturally jealous of others, makes them sort of pessimist towards others. Because if somebody is coming towards us, he's coming to loot us, he's coming to attack us, he's coming to kill us. So all these elements are there. And with all those elements, when people settle in a city, still that culture is there, that mindset is there. And we see all these elements in the way that people used to behave each other. So I was saying that it was looked at as the political state authority. I mean, after the Prophet, it was looked at totally as a political position, a worldly position, the way that they used to choose a head of a tribe. And when you look at the debates, for example, in Saqifa, this has been narrated in different books. One of the very authentic sources like Tariq Tabari. When you look at all those sources, the debates that people had in Saqifa for choosing Khalifa, it's not about the merits or faza'il or iman or ilm, knowledge at all. None of these things. It's about from which tribe are you? We are the tribe of the Prophet. You answer, you are not from the tribe of the Prophet. This man is older than, so is it to be older, to be from the tribe of the Prophet? All the values which are being mentioned is about the tribal mentality, tribal mindset. We are choosing a head of a tribe. And the way that Abu Bakr came to introduce himself, that he said, I don't claim I'm better than you and I know more than you. No, there might be people who know better than me, but anyhow, people chose me and I will rule over the Muslims. So the way that the Ashab and the companions, they used to come to Abu Bakr and sometimes criticize him, question him, the way that they had their communication and their dealing with the other Khulafa. And the most clear one is the way that they dealt with Uthman, the third Khalifa. Shows that they didn't see in any specific virtue, something more than the others for the Khalifa. But later on, when Muawiyah was the full authority after Imam Ali salam was killed and Imam Hassan salam was forced to accept the peace treaty, when all the rivals were out of the arena and Muawiyah was alone, he had to emphasize on the position of few people, Khulafa and then Sahaba. And the idea being that, according to history, he decided to fabricate hadiths in the virtues of Osman because he considered himself successor to Osman. And the reason being that, Muawiyah was a rebel. Muawiyah rebelled against Imam Ali alayhi salam. Imam Ali as the fourth Khalifa was chosen by people and Muawiyah rebelled against him. Now, Muawiyah was considered a rebellion, Ahlul Baghi. So how could he justify his authority? They came with the idea that Osman was killed oppressively. And Imam Ali is involved in killing Osman. We have it in the story of arbitration when Abu Musa Ash'ari and Amr As, they came for arbitration, Hakimiyah. So they were about to discuss the fate of the war, the Battle of Siffin. And Amr As said, tell me to Abu Musa, tell me, was Osman a Muslim or not? And Abu Musa said, we are not here to talk about Osman. We are here to talk about this battle, which Muslims are killing each other. Amr said, okay, just answer my question. Was Osman Muslim or not? He said, yeah, of course he was a Muslim. And then he questioned the second one. Was he killed oppressively or not? He said, yes. Then he said, do you see any right for the Wali and heir and successor Osman to take revenge of his blood? Thar in Arabic, it was a very known culture, taking revenge of your relative. He said, yes, there is such a right for the Wasi and for the successor of Osman. Muawiyah then said, this is the story of the war, the battle, that we are to take revenge of Osman. Ali is the killer of Osman. That's why they made all the stories that Imam Ali alayhi salam was involved in killing Osman, while we know that according to historical points, nobody defended Osman the way that Imam Ali did.
Yeah.
But anyhow, they had to emphasize on the faza'il and the virtues of Usman, because Muawiyah was connecting himself to Khilafah through Usman. And Usman was killed in a very bad way. You know, the way that Muslims killed him, as if they didn't consider him to be a Muslim. They didn't bury his body for 3 days. Later on, they buried him in the part of the Jews in Baqi. And later on, when Muawiyah was authority, had the full authority he had the command that they had to join that part of the graveyard to the Baqi of the Muslims. Then the grave of Osman was in the Muslims part. So he had to emphasize on the position of Osman, and according to historical narrations, he said that anyone who can fabricate hadiths in the virtues of Osman, they will be rewarded. And all those hadiths fabricated, and then in order to, after they fabricated enough hadiths about Osman, then about the other Khulafa, then about Sahaba. And the reason was that when in the sky of Islam, there are thousands of shining stars, then a person like Ali will not be the only shining star. If Ali has virtues, all Sahaba are like that. Imam Ali salam, you know, just imagine, bear in mind that for 60 years, they cursed and badmouthed him in every masjid, in every place they performed salat. Everywhere for 60 years. And after all those propaganda that they had, still you see, as one of the Sunni scholars says, his name has filled the east and the west. So at that time, Imam alayhi salam was known as a virtuous person, and all those faza'il narrated from the Prophet about Ali alayhi salam was there. So for them to get the full authority for Bani Umayyah was to disgrace Imam Ali alayhi salam, not to give any chance to Bani Hashim, to raise the position of Sahaba and Khulafa. So here you see that political issue was combined with the religious one. And later on, other issues like Masail Mustahdasa, the newly occurring events, that they needed answers to those questions. What are the answers to these questions that are newly happening? Because at the time of the Prophet, the society is very basic society. It's very small, limited one. And now, after conquering lands, people are coming from higher cultures, from Persia, from Rome, from Egypt, and lots of new questions are coming, and we don't have any answers because people didn't ask such questions from the Prophet. So the religious authority at that time could be the Sahaba. So if Sahaba have such a religious authority, then their saying can be equal to the sayings of the Prophet. So because of all these things, it made it difficult later on when religious aspect and political aspects were combined. Then it was difficult to criticize that era of Islam. It became like a very sacred era. You know, the Prophet himself didn't have such authority. I mean, at the way that people looked at him. One of the problems that the Prophet had is this, that, for example, Tabari mentions that once a person came to Umar ibn al-Khattab and asked him about mut'ah, that what is the ruling of mut'ah, temporary marriage. Umar said it's forbidden. But he said we used to do it at the time of the Prophet. Umar said now I'm saying it's a ban. It's banned. It's not legal anymore. The guy insisted that the Prophet permitted. Umar said Ana Zamilu Muhammad. I'm a person like Muhammad. Muhammad was one of us. So Muhammad was my fellow. You see, I mean, those people, the way that they looked at the Prophet, that he's one of us, so I can be an authority like him. So at that time, even those people had such a claim that, you know, even they have Ahlul Sunnah to justify these things, they have Musaddiqat Umar. They say that they have fabricated things, that there are occasions that there was a dispute between the Prophet and Umar. Then Jibreel brought the message that he is right and the Prophet is wrong. So, I mean, when there is such approach even towards the Prophet, and later on Sahaba are given such a position that nobody even can question. You cannot question why a Sahabi did this or that. Yeah. And when history is to be established based on this narrative, it becomes very difficult. So you see that in different sources they have mentioned that you are not allowed to mention anything ugly about Sahaba. So historical books and history sources, always if they want to narrate something from the history, that if we have a chance in the other session, we may go through some of these, texts to see that you're not allowed to mention anything that could be a kind of, criticizing Sahaba.
Yes.
Only you are allowed to speak those nice aspects and beautiful things. Whether you have to keep silent, or if you want to speak, you have to speak in a way that you advocate and support Sahaba. But you cannot question, can criticize even very clear things in their lives.
So I guess like coming back to the original question about if you want to establish something happened historically, I think one way I can summarize your answer is that first of all, we definitely have to take into consideration the beliefs of the people at that time. What were their presuppositions? What was their mindset? How did they view the people around them? So in this case, for example, okay, we're looking at the history of early Islam, right after the Prophet. What was the mindset of these people who had just newly converted to Islam? The caliphs, for example, what were their views? How did they see themselves? How did they rule society? I guess what we can say is that it's very important to take all this into consideration before going into the historical sources and seeing, for example, okay, why is it not the case that, for example, the history books should be 100% clear and giving all the details about, for example, how the caliph, for example, attacked the house of Hazrat Zahra. I think like if you come without looking at this background, this would be a valid question. But now that you come and say, okay, this is the background, your expectations are lowered. You're not expecting to see, for example, yes, everything that the caliph did that is negative, as you said, it should be all out there open in the public. And so I feel like maybe that's one of the important factors that we should consider when we are trying to establish a historical event and see what is the atmosphere at that time and what should we expect to be seen in the books at that time. So building on that, if we want to establish that a certain event, so for example, our discussion is about how the events that unfolded after the death of the Prophet and how they attacked the house of Hazrat Zahra salamullahi alayha. If we want to like look at that event specifically, what would be our way of going about and trying to prove what happened in that event? Are we supposed to, for example, go to, I don't know, Kitab al-Kafi and say, okay, let me find a Sahih Hadith that says XYZ happened? Or how do we go about trying to establish anything that happened at that time?
Yeah, usually what we have to do, as I said, you are like an inspector. You have to look for every tiny clue, which when you put them together, it's like a jigsaw puzzle showing you some image and some photo of what has happened. In geopolitics, they say if you want to truly understand things, you have to revive the space of the event, space in a sense that the atmosphere that event was breathing. So you have to revive the atmosphere of the events taking place in Medina immediately after the time of the Prophet, after the demise of the Prophet. So in order to know what has happened to Lady Fatima, you have to study the last days of the life of the Prophet. Why something like long period around 70 maybe days from the last days of the life of the Prophet is censored, is omitted from the books. Why? There is no record of the life of the Prophet within those 70 days. What has happened at that time? The Sahaba that they used to narrate every single thing in the life of the Prophet, the way that the Prophet smiled to someone, the way that the Prophet drank a cup of water, or so and so. Why for 70 days almost, the last days which are very critical and important and history making, there is nothing. Again, we see some clues in the why the Prophet decides to go to Tabuk. You have to understand these things. Why the Prophet decided to go to Tabuk? It's a very difficult one, around 800 kilometers to walk in the hot desert just to fight some very, very Christians, that they were not immediate threat to Islam because they didn't want to come and attack the Prophet. What is their influence within Medina? What was the connection with the hypocrites in Medina? So fighting them actually is kind of disconnecting the support for the hypocrites inside. So actually teaching the hypocrites inside that not only we can punish you, but also the ones who are supporting you. So then why, after coming back from Tabuk, those people decide to assassinate the Prophet, as Quran talks about and the history talks about it? Huzayfat ibn Yaman saw the faces of those people, and the people who were about to kill the Prophet. Why should this happen, but while we don't see it in the other places? What is that secret of the Prophet which is exposed to people when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about it in Quran? So those last days of the Prophet, Raziyatul Khamis is another issue, that the way that the Prophet was sort of isolated those last days at home, and there were different, suspicious movements taking place. Some of the ladies sent their fathers to perform salat, and the Prophet comes and tries to remove him from the place. And there are 9 hadiths in Sahih Bukhari and Muslim about it, all contradictory, and all showing that the Prophet didn't want the person to actually finish the salat. And so all these things putting together, then it makes sense that why the demise of Lady Fatima is not clearly mentioned in the books, because it's a very vague issue, very vague concept in those books. When you look at the books, you cannot make heads or tails exactly what's happening. There is some conflict, there is some dispute, but it's not clear over what and for what reason, what exactly happened. All of a sudden, lady passed away, and as nothing has happened, there is no burial, no way of people gathering to bury such a respected lady, the only remaining from the family of the Prophet. Bear in mind all the hadiths about Lady Fatima, that the Prophet, according to Sunni hadiths, for 8 months coming to the door of Lady Fatima 3 times or 5 times of salat, and saying, passing salam to them and saying that إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمُ الرِّجْسَ أَهْلَ الْبَيْتِ. So with all those virtues of Lady Fatima Salamullah alayha, all these suspicious events, then you have to put them together.
Yeah. And her age as well.
Said, then you have to try to revive the atmosphere that Lady Fatima passed away or was killed, and then you have to make the logical reasoning out of those clues which are there. So we cannot be naive about the history. I said when it is connected with the issue of authority and power, when it is connected with all those political issues around, you cannot just be naive about such issues. And if somebody is really looking for the truth, if somebody is really looking for the answer, so you have to put all those different facts together to find a clear, more likely and acceptable picture of the story.
Yeah. No, I think definitely I feel like not even Islamic history, I feel history in general works like that. It's all about putting different pieces of clues together, putting different pieces of evidence together, and then trying to make up a picture on its own. So if that's going to be our methodology, we're trying to find different clues and find different pieces of evidence. So coming to our main discussion, where, okay, we are in the days of Fatemiyah, and of course, many people will have this question, and they will say that, okay, the common or popular narrative that Shias have, and historically actually have had since the beginning, it's never changed, is that the caliphs came and they attacked the house of Hazrat Zahra, they burned the door, they attacked her, which then led to her martyrdom. So now if we want to prove something at that scale, where, it's a huge event that you're claiming, using this methodology that you have stated, how do we go about proving this?
Yeah, the question is that when they ask how is it possible? And or sometimes they say that why it is not in your books. So show any proof acceptable Sahih Hadith in your books. In order to understand it, I have to ask this question. What do you think is the duty of a Sunni scholar? Imagine if today a Sunni scholar finds a very old edition and version of Sahih Bukhari belonging to the very first centuries, and in that book he finds a hadith that talks about the issue that openly declares that Khulafa were involved in killing Lady Fatima Salamullah alayha. As a religious scholar, what is the duty of this person? What should he do? Authentic source, such a hadith is there. What is the duty? Fuqaha of Ahlul Sunnah, they say it is obligatory to hide such a thing. And if you cannot hide the book, for example, the book is discovered in a kind of archaeological event, and you cannot hide it because people already know about it. So what should you do here? If you cannot hide it, you have to destroy it. At least that page you have to take it out of the book. They have masalih mursala, the highly important issues. One of them is to protect the iman and faith of people. They say there are some priorities in Islam. To protect those priorities, if it entails, you are allowed to do some even sins. You can commit some sins in order to protect those priorities. Like, for example, lying. If you tell the truth, people are going to lose their faith. What is your Shari'i duty here? According to Masalih Mursala, they say you can lie because by lying here you are protecting the iman and faith of people. So here you have to lie. Then people and their iman is safe. Now here, if you find a hadith about Khulafa attacking the door of Lady Fatima, your Shari'i duty is to hide it or to destroy it. So with this in mind, how do you expect a Sunni scholar to come and openly declare that Khulafa were involved, for example, in killing Lady Fatima Salamullah alayha? If the person, if to narrate such a thing, then that person will lose the position among the Ahlul Sunnah. The person will be an evil character. The person will be considered Rafizi. The person will lose his authority. So it's not the matter of just speaking and telling the truth, and then by telling the truth, you have exposed the truth to people. By telling the truth, you are to lose your position as a religious scholar. So then by this mindset and by this context, you cannot expect a Sunni scholar to come and openly talk about what has happened. Let's just assume that such a thing was there. I mean, let's assume that Khulafa were involved in killing Lady Fatima. The question is that, can any Sunni scholar narrate this? The answer is no. Because whether it is against the belief, it is against the way that they consider it iman and taqwa, or if the person is about to narrate it, then he will lose his own position and he will be rejected. He will be accused of being Rafizi, and the person will be removed from the books of hadith, and he will be among Zu'afa and the liars, and he will not be among the reliable muhaddithin. So by narrating such a thing, you cannot expose a fact, but you will lose your own authority.
Yeah.
So by bearing this in mind, you cannot expect any Sunni scholar to come and to talk about this issue.
Yeah.
Now let's just talk about some examples in the history to see that how this happened. For example, we have a person, Ibn Abi Darim. This is one of the Imams of Hadith among Ahlul Sunnah. He was a very reliable person.
Which century?
It is around the 6th century, 6th, 7th century. Zahabi in his book Mizan al-I'tidal, when he comes to Ibn Abi Darim, Yahya ibn Abi Darim, one of the early muhaddithin of Ahl Sunnah, he says, كان مستقيم الأمر عامة دهره. He was in a right path, a straight path all his life. ثم في آخر أيامه كان أكثر ما يغرى عليه المثالب. So at the last part of his life, what he used to hear and read was the criticisms against the Sahaba and Khulafa. And he says, I was there when a person was reciting for him the narration that Omar kicked Lady Fatima in her stomach and she miscarried Muhsin. Then a Sunni scholar, he was in the right path all his life. So, and now such a person, after a scholastic life, he came to the idea that Khulafa were involved in killing Lady Fatima Salamullah alayha. Then he says he has been accused of being Ar-Rafizi al-Kadhab. He was in the right path, and now after mentioning such things, he is Rafizi, he is Kazzab, he is liar, and he is not to be accepted as a reliable person. He says in Siyar A'lam an-Nubala Shamsuddin al-Dhahabi, he says كان موصوفا بالحفظ والمعرفة. He was Hafiz, he was of good recording of Hadith, he had ma'rifah, knowledge about Hadith, إلا أنه يترفس. But the problem was that he was Rafizi.
Yeah.
Why Rafizi? Because of what we mentioned about him. And then he says in another place that when he mentions the Hadith from Ibn Abi Darim, he says muttafaqun alayh, but he says this Shaykh is there, Shaykhun Zallun Mu'thar. This evil, crooked Shaykh is there, Ibn Abi Darim. Why? Because Ibn Abi Darim was Rafizi. And why he was Rafizi? Because he was mentioning such a thing about Khulafa. So you see, if somebody was about to mention things that was not commonly accepted by those people, then he could easily be accused of being Rafizi and to lose the position that the person had. Another example, if we just want to mention what I'm saying, is Ibn Qutayba ad-Daynawari. In his book Al-Imamat and Wilayat, he sort of openly talked about attacking the house of Lady Fatima Salamullah alayha, and he mentioned the story in a very naked way that the others didn't mention. Then Sunni scholars, when they come to him, it's heavy for them. It's very heavy for them to accept this, and they try to sort of question that why he had mentioned such story. For example, Ibn Arabi in his book Al-Awasim min al-Qawasim, he says, وَمِنْ أَشَدِّ شَيْءٍ عَلَى النَّاسِ جَاهِلٌ عَاقِلٌ. The worst of things that can hurt people is an ignorant who is wise. أو مبتدئ محتال. The person who is Ahlul Bid'ah, he is of innovation and fabrication within religion. فَأَمَّا الْجَاهِلْ فَهُوَ ابْنُ قُتَيْبَةَ. Who is the ignorant is Ibn Qutayba. فلم يبق ولم يظهر للصحابة رسما في كتاب الإمامة والسياسة إن صح عنه جميع ما فيه. This person didn't let anything hidden from Sahaba only other than he exposed it to people. So this is Jahil. Why he is Jahil? Because he talked about things that he had the duty to hide, and he was not allowed to mention this. In another place, Ibn Hajar Haythami, for example, when talks about this issue and the book of Al-Imam al-Siyasa by Ibn Hajar, he says that uh, this book, I'm surprised. He says مع تأليف صدرت من بعض المحدثين كابن قتيبة مع جلالته الغازية. He's a great person, and I am surprised how such a person can write such a book. بأنه كان ينبغي له ألا يذكر تلك الظواهر. It was upon him not to mention anything of those issues. What is the duty?
To hide.
Not to mention anything of those issues. فإن أبى إلا أن يذكرها. But if he wanted to insist on narrating the history, if he wanted to narrate the history, what was his duty? He says, إلا فإن أبى إلا أن يذكرها فليبين جريانها على قواعد أهل السنة. If he wanted to mention the story, he had to mention it according to the rules of Ahlul Sunnah. And the rules of Ahlul Sunnah, as Ibn Abi Ya'la says in Tabaqat al-Hanabila, he says that the duty is that whenever we come across to anything ugly about Sahaba, we have to hide it, or even if we want to narrate it, we have to narrate it in a way which is smooth, which is moderated, but even people can hide or even destroy it. So when there is such approach among them, we cannot expect them to mention all the details. So even to narrate a very tiny aspect of the issue, that suffices for us. And this is how it is with them. So yes, we look for the some clues, some evidence in their books, but we do not expect them to openly discuss all the issues there. So we have no choice other than referring it to the books of Shia.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Especially if you are, let's say, Sunni and you're trying to like make up your mind of what's going on. I think if I can summarize your answer, you can say that, okay, because of the sensitivities of the matter, because of their belief in this adalat of the Sahaba and that the Sahaba were all good, so therefore we must cover anything bad. And so therefore for an objective listener, they'd be like, okay, if something is not mentioned in detail here, one possibility is that, okay, throughout the centuries, the scholars have tried to hide it for obvious reasons. And therefore, if I want to establish something, I must broaden my horizon and see what other sources are also saying before I make any conclusion about this. And so I feel that's a very interesting point where we reached in this discussion. And inshallah, hopefully in the next episode, we will continue and saying, okay, what other kinds of evidence we can use to come up with this final jigsaw puzzle that we spoke about. So I want to thank you very much for the information that you have shared. And may Allah increase your tawfiqat and in your knowledge. And for our beloved viewers, I hope you found this episode helpful and beneficial. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. If you did enjoy it, please do subscribe our channel and keep watching our content. Inshallah, much more is going to be coming in the future. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.